these students are and what the reasons for their non-registration, returning or fresh is or are. And if you do, then please give us those things. And then I'm assuming
and empowers us to gather. The Protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
A very warm welcome to our coverage of the Budget Speech 2025 right here on Parliament TV, DSTV channel 408. Libitso la ka ke Tshepo Mori.
Igama lam ndinguThembi Nkosi Ngoma. At 2 p.m. the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will take to the podium at Nivemeester Dome to deliver one of the most critical addresses of the year, the National Budget Speech.
Of course, the budget is more than just numbers. It's about shaping the future of our economy, funding key government priorities, and ensuring that resources are allocated to where they are needed most.
And that's right, Tshepo. And Parliament plays a key role in this process. As the legislative arm of the state, Parliament doesn't just receive the budget. It scrutinizes, debates, and approves it. Today, we'll be unpacking the role of Parliament in ensuring financial accountability and responsible governance.
It's important to know that the budget process actually begins with the President's State of the Nation address, where government service delivery priorities are announced. Now, this sets the stage for today's budget speech, where the Minister of Finance outlines how these priorities will be funded. The budget speech is not just one document. Today, the Minister will table the fiscal framework, the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriations Bill, as well as related budget information.
And the budget process doesn't end there. After today's speech, Parliament takes over, ensuring that every cent allocated is aligned with national priorities. This is where members of Parliament step in to scrutinize, debate, and ultimately approve the budget through a structured process.
Of course, Parliament exercises its oversight role in several ways. Now, the first is that it debates the fiscal framework, the plan for government spending and revenue collection. Then it considers the Division of Revenue Bill, which determines how funds are shared across national, provincial and local government. Finally, it examines the Appropriations Bill, which allocates money to specific departments and government entities.
And let's not forget that this oversight continues throughout the financial year. Parliamentary committees monitor government spending, assess service delivery performance, and ensure that departments remain accountable for their use of public funds.
This is a key part of our democracy, making sure that the budget works for the people. So as we count down to the budget speech, stay with us as we unpack more about the budget process and what the budget means for you and the country at large.
And you can follow all the proceedings on the budget speech on Parliament TV, DSTV channel 408, on all our social media platforms, X, IG, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. But stay tuned as Parliament TV as we discuss the implications of the budget with the chairpersons of key finance committees at Parliament.
Following the President's State of the Nation address on 6 February, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Godongwana, will present the budget allocation for 2025 to Parliament on Wednesday, 19 February at 2 p.m. The budget speech, among others, aims to balance economic growth and support for the vulnerable in our society despite limited resources. During the speech, Mr. Godongwana will outline all the financial, economic and social commitments that the government will prioritize in its planned expenditure. The Minister will provide a detailed plan for 2025 spending, including proposals for revenue collection to help fund government's planned interventions and commitments. He will also introduce the appropriation bill and table the division of revenue bill, which Parliament will process in the following months. The budget process is one of the critical instruments that Parliament utilizes to conduct oversight over the executive. Watch the budget speech live across Parliament's platforms from 2 p.m. on Wednesday, 19 February. Your Parliament, your voice, your future. Processing of the budget is one of the most important oversight functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources.
Welcome back to our special live coverage of the 2025 budget speech here on Parliament TV. And as we build up to the Minister of Finance, Godongwana's much anticipated budget speech, we take a closer look at the critical role that Parliament plays in ensuring the budget process. And one of the key committees responsible for ensuring accountability and oversight over government spending is the Standing Committee on Finance. This committee plays a pivotal role in oversight of the National Treasury and other statutory entities, reviewing strategic plans and budgets and ensuring that economic policies are effectively implemented. To give us more insight into the work of the committee and how today's budget speech impacts its work, I'm honored to be joined by the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, Dr. Joe Maswanganyi. Chairperson, welcome to Parliament TV, and thank you very much for taking time off your schedule to talk to us. Chair, your committee has a crucial mandate in overseeing the National Treasury. Can you take us through how the committee ensures fiscal accountability and transparency in government spending?
Thanks. There are almost 4 committees that are responsible for finance matters. One is the Standing Committee Finance, of which I'm the chairperson. Then from Standing Committee Finance, we hand over the task to the appropriations. From there, you have got a committee like SCOPA, which scrutinizes audits, and then you have got a Standing Committee Auditor General. Our Standing Committee Finance plays an oversight role over National Treasury, which is responsible for the fiscals of the Republic. We play oversight role on the SARS, which is responsible for collecting revenue. When the minister tables the budget this afternoon, the Speaker will refer legislations that he will have presented, the revenue bill, the ESCOM bill, and other related bills to the Standing Committee Finance. From there, tomorrow, the Minister will give a full briefing to the joint Standing Committees of Finance, and then we take the process forward in terms of inviting the public to participate in the budget process.
Now, before we talk on the public participation on this process, I know that your committee plays a very critical role in scrutinizing and approving the budget. So how does the committee contribute to reviewing, amending, or initiating legislation related to the national budget?
In the main, we take it from where the President will have left. The President, at the beginning of the year, tables the SONA, speak to the people of the Republic and internationally, and the President will highlight certain critical areas that he would like that all government departments should focus on, more especially on service delivery related matters. And then 2 weeks after, then you have the Minister of Finance. So the Minister of Finance will have to speak to issues that are contained in the SONA, issues that are contained in the medium-term development plan, which I think Cabinet has adopted. You will have to speak to issues which are in the National Development Plan 2030, critical issues of unemployment. How is government going to deal with the issue of youth unemployment? Because we have got so many young people who are not working. On top of that, the economy can't even be able to absorb the young graduates. So this is a problem. And government has to do something about it, working together with the private sector. And then we also have to look as to how has SARS, which is dealing with revenue collection, managed to collect revenue to an extent that we still have challenges, because now we have got deficit. Deficit in the sense that the money that SARS has collected is not enough to can be able to cater for all the government needs. At the end, government has to go out and borrow. And for now, that is a problem, because government is spending more than 350 to 400 billion a year servicing debt, not to pay off the debt, because the debt is so high up to so far. So those are some of the critical issues that the minister will have to explain to the committee. How are they managing debt? Because it's a problem. How are they dealing with the issue of unemployment? How are they dealing with the issue of the economic growth? Because the solution is to grow the economy. So those are some of the critical issues that we'll be looking at and check as to whether the issues that is raising, are they funded in the budget?
And of course, we know that the president, when he delivered that State of the Nation address, spoke strongly on issues of economic growth as well as fighting unemployment. And we do know that yesterday the Stats SA did release a quarterly report for 2025, which also indicated a slight drop of 0.2% in unemployment. But to move forward, you mentioned earlier about the public participation processes that will follow after today's budget speech by the minister. And I know that it's one of your key commitments to ensure that the public becomes participates in these economic policy discussions. Yeah. So what is your committee going to do in order to ensure that the voices of ordinary citizens, of civil society and business stakeholders are heard throughout this budget process?
Society plays a key role in the governance of the country. You can't leave society behind because we are here elected by them. They can choose even to remove us from parliament. So we can't do or take decisions without their involvement. It's a constitutional imperative that on critical issues like budget, we have to involve the public. Next week, we are going to call the public to participate in a public hearing as to what are their views in regard to the budget that will have been tabled by the minister this afternoon. So we listen to them. They make oral and written submissions. And then from there, we consider all those submissions, put together a report that we submit or table in the National Assembly, which gets adopted. Once the report will have been adopted by the National Assembly, then the process is handed over to Appropriations. Appropriations Committee is responsible for the division of revenue as to how much goes to which department, to local government, to municipalities. That's the responsibility of the Appropriations Committee. Ours is the fiscal policy, to look at the economy of the country, how money has been generated, and what other better strategies can be applied to increase revenue collection.
Now, I'd want to also just remind members of our viewers that we are talking to Dr. Joe Maswanganyi, who is the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance. You can follow these discussions on Parliament TV channel 408 and all our social media platforms at Parliament of RSA. And as Dr. Maswanganyi has indicated that next week, Parliament will be holding public hearings as part of its public participation process on the budget speech that will be delivered by the Minister of Finance today. Now, to move on, Dr. Maswanganyi, you have a responsibility to now monitor the implementation of this budget. The President would have outlined government's priorities. We have the Minister today, 2 o'clock, who will then put finances into those priorities that the President has outlined. And we have Parliament that plays an oversight role also in the monitoring of the implementation of the budget. Now, what mechanism does the committee have in place to track government expenditure, service delivery performance, as well as financial accountability?
There are various tools that we apply to monitor the Department of Finance, SARS, and other entities that report to the Standing Committee Finance. One amongst those which is quite critical is their annual performance plan, because they come to Parliament, outline how, as the Department of Finance, they will perform throughout the year. The same applies with SARS. It comes to Parliament, tables the APP. So on a quarterly basis, we assess progress as to whether they are able to meet the targets that they will have set for themselves. If they don't meet the target, they have to explain to Parliament as to what is their problem and what are the remedial actions that they are going to take to make sure that they meet the targets as stipulated in their annual performance plan. So that's one key instrument that we apply. we have got a scientific method of making that analysis so that we are not all over in analyzing them or assessing progress that they are making. So if SARS say half a year we'll have collected so much, they will have to come to Parliament and we ask them, how far are you with what you have targeted yourself? We don't decide an annual performance plan for them. It's not our responsibility. And then also we have got the targets as set out in the MTDP and in the National Development Plan. We say, here are the targets. Why are you not meeting these targets? Explain to the people of South Africa, because this is what we have to do to better the life of our people. As I've said, we have got critical problem of unemployment, which the policy, the economic growth policy, has to make sure that it does something, it must seriously dent the issue of unemployment. We can't continue as it is now. It's not going to be sustainable moving forward.
I'm glad, Dr. Masongane, you mentioned that you explained in detail how you conduct monitoring of the implementation of this budget, but you mentioned that these institutions, you mentioned one such as SARS, who then may come in and present their annual performance plans to you, which contains their annual targets, and then when you do an assessment at the end of that financial year, and then you do realize that sometimes these targets were not met and remedial actions gets presented to you. But what are the consequence management of targets when departments or state institutions are not meeting their targets? Yes, we can provide remedial actions, but are there any consequence management?
Sometimes you find the Auditor General assist us in regard to consequence management, where you find officials will have transgressed the law, will have done things in such a way that somebody has to be punished. Institutions like Auditor General, which assist us with monitoring, evaluation, and playing oversight, does make recommendations that there must be consequence management on a particular official or a particular entity. SIU, which is an instrument of government which conducts investigations from time to time, does report to us and other committees where they will have found impropriety to say this action must be taken, or other security organs of the state have got a role to play if ever officials maybe violate the law. Then we call upon the minister to take an appropriate action on that particular official or on that particular organ of state. We don't directly deal with the officials. That's the purview of a minister. It's the minister who directly account to Parliament, assisted by the Director General or by a head of a particular institution. And in the case of SARS, it will be the commissioner. In the case of the Reserve Bank, it will be the governor. And then in the case of entities, it will be the chairperson of that board and the CEO. So in that regard, there is a line of command which have got responsibilities in making sure that state institutions are run properly. If not, there must be consequences.
Before I let you go, I need to ask this because it relates to the key focus areas for your committee for this year's budget. Now, we know that some of the key economic challenges and priorities were outlined in SONA by the President. So, what are some of those that you expect the President, the Minister of Finance to address when he delivers the budget at 2 p.m. this afternoon?
The President spoke about the growth of the economy. And to an extent that if the economy can grow at 3%, for instance, it is going to make a dent in dealing with issues of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. we think that the Minister of Finance, we hope, he's going to address the issue of how the economy is going to grow, because it's his responsibility as a minister responsible for the fiscal framework. The President spoke about denting the issue of unemployment. The minister must talk about specific plans that government is going to embark upon to deal with unemployment, partnering with the private sector on a whole range of issues, be it on Transnet, be it on ESCOM and other entities that are critical. The minister will have to outline that with the difficulties that ESCOM, Telkom, Transnet, PRASA, how is he bringing on board private entities to come and participate in those sectors that the President has spoken about? The details must be in the budget. The President outlined the policy framework that the following should be done. Then it's up to the Minister of Finance. Subsequent to the Minister of Finance, it will be individual or respective ministers of different departments that will speak in detail on issues that will have been raised by the President and by the Minister of Finance. So the sequence is the SONA by President, budget by Minister of Finance, then their colleagues, various ministers who are responsible for different portfolios. So we'll be monitoring this chain of presentations to Parliament to make sure that they are in line with the NDP 2030, MTDP, and other plans that government has to make sure that the economy grows.
And whilst you do that monitoring on the spending of the country's finances, as Parliamentary, we will be monitoring the work of your committee. And Chairperson, I want to thank you very much for sharing those valuable insights with Parliamentary and our viewers at home.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Well, that was the Chairperson, Dr. Joe Maswanganyi. It's clear that the work of the Standing Committee on Finance is crucial in ensuring that the budget is transparent, accountable, and aligned with national priorities. And as we count down to the Minister Kodongwana's speech, stay tuned for more discussion right here on Parliament TV as we build up to the 2025 budget speech. So don't go anywhere.
igama lami ndisikhophele ifani ngumbangi ndifunda apha eMushesha 37 ndinathwe ndizokwenza 13 kulo nyaka. Ingxaki esinje singabantwana abancinci sidibane nazo ukufisa i-challenge sesinzima kakhulu ngoba singabantwana siyahlukunyezwa kakhulu. That's why uButhulane uye wafika besikoleni njenge-fundraising wasike wasipha chance ba masiye pha kuye ke sizikhulu inhliziyo zethu into ezenzeka esitratweni. Saya kuye ke uButhulane asinceda sasafumaneka sakhululeka ngoba kasemoyeni sisikolo salapha eMushesha. Ndiyacinga urhulumente bani anga-donate imali kwi-foundation ezidila nabantwana kuba singabantwana ezinye izinto zisiphathe kakhulu ngamanye amaxesha ke sicinga uzibulala. Umyalezo endimgqithisayo ndithi mna masingalahlani ithemba. uThixo uza imini yakho iyazi uThixo usayigcinile. Awuyazi uba uThixo ngengomso ngengomso kwale miqobo osuleka ngayo uThixo uza kuphathele yakho into. So ndithi ke ngoku kwindanga zam ba masingalahleni ithemba kuseeli.
Turning to the international outlook, global economic growth is forecast at 3.2% in 2024 and 2025. Global trade is expected to grow by an annual average of 3.3% and over the same period. There are several risks to this outlook. These include persistent geopolitical tensions, and the threat of escalating conflict in the Middle East remains a concern. wars elsewhere, such as in the Sudan and the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, threaten regional and international stability, as well as global trade. These risks imply that emerging markets and developing countries such as South Africa will continue to face headwinds over the medium term. Domestically, we focus on a real GDP growth of 1.1% in 2024. This is lower than the estimate of 1.3% in February. Over the medium term, growth is forecast to average 1.8%. This underscores the need for higher inclusive growth to meet the aspirations of a better life for all. This policy statement aligns our strategy to lift the economy to a higher and more inclusive growth path. The strategy is anchored in 4 pillars. The first one is maintaining macroeconomic stability. The second one is to implementing structural reforms. Thirdly, is supporting growth-enhancing infrastructure, and lastly, building an ethical and developmental state. Honourable members, Pillar 1 is about a stable, transparent, and predictable macroeconomic framework that creates a conducive environment for businesses and households to save, spend, invest, and grow. The National Treasurer has the responsibility for oversight and implementation of macroeconomic policy framework.
Following the President's State of the Nation address on 6 February, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will present the budget allocation for 2025 to Parliament on Wednesday, 19 February at 2 p.m. The budget speech, among others, aims to balance economic growth and support for the vulnerable in our society, despite limited resources. During the speech, Mr. Godongwana will outline all the financial, economic, and social commitments that the government will prioritize in its planned expenditure. The Minister will provide a detailed plan for 2025 spending, including proposals for revenue collection to help fund government's planned interventions and commitments. He will also introduce the appropriation bill and table the division of revenue bill, which Parliament will process in the following months. The budget process is one of the critical instruments that Parliament utilizes to conduct oversight over the executive. Watch the budget speech live across Parliament's platforms from 2 p.m. on Wednesday, 19 February. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
On Parliament TV, where we unpack the key themes, policies and economic priorities that will shape South Africa's financial trajectory in the coming year. Now, as the nation eagerly awaits Minister Enoch Godongwana's address, it's crucial to explore the broader economic planning that informs the budget. Now, one of the key institutions guiding long-term national development is the National Planning Commission, which plays a strategic role in shaping South Africa's economic future. Now, joining us is Dr. Tshepo Fela, a commissioner at the National Planning Commission, a distinguished academic, an economist and entrepreneur. His expertise spans mathematical economics, research and business development, with a strong focus on solving Africa's economic challenges through academia and innovation. Dr. Fela, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please just briefly explain to us what the National Planning Commission is.
Okay. So the National Planning Commission, appointed by the President, is the custodian of the National Development Plan. Yes. So we are tasked with advising government in the implementation and execution of the goals of the National Development Plan. So we are separated in different work streams that deal with different chapters of the NDP. So ours is to make sure that government and the different spheres of government really their plans are in line with NDP targets for us to really achieve the goals and the economic growth that we envisage for the country, the well-being of the citizens, the kind of infrastructure that we want, basically to build a world-class country through long-term planning. And the NPC is the body of expertise independent of government that is tasked with the execution and drafting and planning of these goals. Yeah.
Now, with that then, South Africa's newly adopted medium-term development plan of 2024 to 2029 is a critical framework guiding government priorities over the next 5 years. Now, can you explain then how it aligns, right, with the National Development Plan for 2030 and what that means for the year's budget?
Okay, so the MTDP is drawn from the NDP chapters. So with these different strategic priorities, one is derivative of the other. So you have the different strategic priorities of the NDP, including inclusive economic growth and job creation, which is drawn from the different chapters of the NDP. Your economic employment, chapter 4, economic infrastructure, chapter 5, 6, and 7, and so forth. So the different priorities or the different strategic priorities of the NDP are subset or drawn from the chapters of the NDP. So the goals are very much aligned, except one is long-term and the other is more of a short-term implementation framework for the NDP. So the MTDP then, will transition into the different spheres, different, sectors of government, different levels of government as well as part of an implementation framework for the NDP goals. So this is more of a taking a long-term planning or framework and breaking it down into short-term achievable goals and then prioritizing certain mechanisms to move towards achieving these particular goals that are in the long term. So you add it all up in the long term, then you would have achieved, the NDP. So the MTSF, for example, that has transitioned to MDP, which has been, the different medium-term frameworks that are tasked or that are supposed to be the implementing sort of agent for the NDP. So the two are really, the one is really a derivative of the other, and it aligns. I know the MTL 2029 and 2030 is about a year apart, but at this point, all the short-term goals should be coming together to achieve the 2030 NDP goals.
And then with that, you just alluded to the fact that the NDP is more of a long-term vision, whereas the MTDP is more of a short-term vision when it comes to government spending. Tell us then, how do these two frameworks ensure that government spending in the 2025 budget stays on track with South Africa's broader economic and social development plans?
Okay, so these are guidelines. So you have quantitative and qualitative targets in both. And these are guidelines. So look, if we want to achieve a certain 5% growth rate within the country, for example, what short-term mechanisms should we then employ to create an environment for this growth? Whether it is investment in infrastructure, investment in our education system, health, and so forth. So our budget then should be guided by these particular goals. We are saying that by 2030, our investment should be at least 30% of our GDP. Now, how do we get there? Which levers do we need to pull then to get to this particular figure of 30% of the GDP? That means then, do we have to invest in infrastructure? So you'll have to have an entire financial model that you can check whether, if I invest this much in this, what are the results? If I invest this much in that, what are the results? And generally speaking, we know that, for GDP, if GDP increases by 2%, generally unemployment will decrease by 1%, economically speaking, theoretically. So you would then have to look at that and break it down then into the different components of the NDP, for example, and then let that guide your budget where you need to spend, whether it's in social elements, whether economic elements, infrastructure, and so forth.
Now, on the back of that, of course, one of the NDP's core goals is to eliminate poverty and reduce inequality. Now, based on those priorities outlined in the MTDP, which key sectors should we expect to see prioritized in this year's budget?
Generally, the obvious ones, would be your agriculture, manufacturing, mining, tourism, transport, and so forth. Those are usually the ones that get a lot of focus. But we also need to look at sectors that will augment labor within these priority sectors, if I should call it that. So, for example, your ICT, education, and so forth. If we invest more in those, in order to build the labor market from the supply side, so that they become more absorbable or more relevant within the priority sectors that we will be investing more money in, or the ones that will be a priority within the budget. This will then create an environment as these sectors grow. So does the skill level that is necessary to feed these sectors. And so we should also look at, the parallel sectors that really augment these ones and try and invest in those as well. One, of course, for this, dealing with this unemployment issue. But secondly, for long-term innovation within the general sectors. And this will bring us, of course, to world standards and access to different markets and ultimately the growth that we want.
Now, of course, you did mention that you play more of an advisory role. And I noticed that there is an advisory note on basic education for priorities for the medium-term development plan 2024 to 2029. Can you just share with us, especially because education is such a concern to most South Africans right now, what were some of the recommendations that the NPC made to ensure that the education sector has proper investment and that it produces the quality education that we so seek?
Well, of course, the reform in the education system and how it is structured, we need to sort of really look at the South Africa within the future and what will South Africa look like in 2030 and so forth. And our current education system and whether it feeds into that. Secondly, the innovation and digitization within the education sector, looking at the ICT, what role will that play in future and what role does it play now? How many schools are connected currently? The number is quite low, and then we need to provide that if we want world-class labor, if we want efficient labor for companies in manufacturing to come and invest in the country. So that's one of the other things that we needed to look at. Different sectors with the DHEAD, the number of schools or universities that exist as compared to the matrics that graduate, what then needs to be done, and all of this free labor that just lingering about. Secondly, the employment within the graduates as well. We need to look at the issue that hindering the employability of graduates, not only in the country but outside of the country as well. We have so many graduates within the country. Why are they not absorbed into the general labor market across the globe? So we need to then restructure ourselves to give our education system to become world class, so that we are absorbable anywhere in the world, really.
And speaking about
those are just some of the things that
and of course then speaking about the fact that when we talk about South Africa economically, we cannot just isolate it, right? We have to consider what is happening outside as well. Now with that, the MTDP also integrates South Africa's commitments to the Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. How should the budget then reflect these international and continental aspirations while addressing domestic economic pressures?
Well, of course, the SDGs, a lot of the chapters in the NDP, are in line or in sync with SDGs. For example, the SDGs 1 to 11, you can find all of them in the NDP chapters. And by achieving the NDP targets within those chapters, you subsequently achieve the SDGs. on for example, issues of infrastructure, education, and such. Those are already included within the NDP, and if we focus on that, we'll subsequently then be dealing with SDGs. We have the National Infrastructure Plan, for example, on SDG 9. And the National Infrastructure Plan clearly covers part of those or whole of those SDG, or the section on SDG 9 within the infrastructure. Issues of governance as well that we need to look at, because once our governance structures, then especially within finance, we obviously need to improve our rating, and once we do that, the interest that we pay goes down, we get more investment and so forth and so forth. So it's quite important that we achieve this, because then it puts us on a global scale to say that we can have, for example, world-class infrastructure.
Yes.
And what that means globally is that we can attract whatever investment that we need, whether it's in tourism or manufacturing or whatever the case might be. But in essence, then it gives us quite a voice, and it puts us on a global map as a developmental or a developed state if we really do well.
And of course, with that, then earlier you did mention that some of the key sectors that need to be focused on are your education, labor, and infrastructure. And with that, then we also know that South Africa faces a huge economic growth issues and high unemployment. So, what are some of the policy interventions then that the MPC believes are necessary to ensure that we combat the issues that we have, and we have an economy that is more labor absorbing, as emphasized in the NDP?
Yeah. So, one, our education policies. Secondly, we our investment policies as well. We need a long-term in investment model. That can fund the kind of infrastructure that we want. If we're talking about water and electricity, ICT, and so forth, we need an investment model that will garner up this capital that is necessary. But in the long term, of course. And if we don't do that, it becomes quite a big of a problem, because then we just remain in the situation where we are. We obviously then need to look at our professionalization of the state, and from a governance perspective, on how we deal with finances and how we deal with transparency and financial governance in general. Given our credit rating globally, we are not in a good position, and we need to improve that. And in that case, these are some of the hindrances, for economic growth, or for investments, or for economic activity within the country. So if we can look at those kind of policies that, remove these barriers to attract this kind of investment that we need, our revenue collection, for example, if we can make it more efficient, free up some cash to reinvest domestically and so forth. Our infrastructure investment in infrastructure, both for general infrastructure and revenue generating infrastructure, that is your Transnet, electricity, your water, and so forth. That will help us, in line with also our efficient revenue collection mechanisms. This will help us within our budget, so that we don't have to constrict ourselves or choke ourselves that much, by increasing taxes and doing these drastic measures and so forth. So that free cash flow then would then help us to invest domestically, whether in mining or those sectors that I've just mentioned earlier. I think that was one of the key strategies, but it will need to be executed quite well.
And of course, with that then, what role then do public-private partnerships play then in ensuring that we develop this investment model that is conducive, and that government spending is effectively leveraged to drive sustainable development?
I think they're quite important, because in most instances, they help government with large infrastructure projects. One, for efficiency, the efficiency of private, helps a lot. It helps government in their spending, especially when you're looking at capital reduction or expenditure reduction, there's a lot of R&D that happens within the private that can be useful for government. Some innovation that can be, fostered back into the public sector, and quite a number of other benefits. But generally, for the spending, in reducing costs, the private sector is quite important in their efficiency and innovation, which generally the public sector really does not, nail at best. So that partnership is quite key to make sure that the budget is spent efficiently and effectively.
And then just another one, I just wanted to know that in the view of the National Planning Commission, why is there a sense of hesitancy when it comes to the private sector, when it comes to collaborating with the public sector?
Well, we don't, as the National Planning Commission, we don't mind the private sector, but I suppose you're asking from the government perspective. I think, look, there are two different sort of mandates. So, for example, if you have to look at efficiency within the private sector, you can measure that with profits, but within the government, you generally it's a qualitative element that you'll have to measure somehow. And so, there's quite that misalignment, because the other one is chasing profits and the other one is chasing, public satisfaction, if you will. And so there's bound to be some sort of misalignment, but there are some synergies that can be exploited, or synergies that can be useful to both. Of course, the relationship cannot be holistic in nature, but there's a certain give and take that must happen. And so it will depend then on the structure government, on the priorities of government. What are they willing to give, and what are they willing to take? And in most cases, there's always that kind of misalignment in between the two.
Now, with that then, let's focus on budget oversight and accountability, right? And we know that the NDP highlights the importance of building a capable state and strengthening democracy. How does the NPC contribute then to ensuring that government spending aligns with national priorities and delivers real impact that is felt on the streets?
We've made some recommendations, really, and that we find could be useful. Amongst others, the implementation of a professionalization framework for the public sector. That if that is implemented well, government would function quite efficiently. The strengthening of the role of the Public Service Commission as well. And as well, finalizing the Public Service Amendment Bill is one of the things that we've recommended that would go a long way. And the recommendation of that was made for PSEC. These are some of the things that we have put forward to say, look, for the state to be capable. These are some of the things that need to happen. Some of the things that must be implemented and finalized. But like we are an advisory, so as far as the implementation of these recommendations, we are sort of limited, but we tend to push the boundaries every now and again.
And what are those boundaries, Dr. Fela, that you push? Because like you say, you're more of an advisory body, right? And there's only so much that you can do in terms of implementation. What are those boundaries that the National Planning Commission tries to push just to ensure that government listens in terms of the recommendations that you make?
Look, some of the things is we have to take the conversations out of the boardrooms and out of the conventions and the conferences and then try and put some sort of accountability. So one of the things that we've done was to put a tracker tool on the NDP goals that can be publicly accessed, where you can go on and say, okay, according to this priority, how far is government? And if you have any questions or you want to have a say, you have a clear visual of where we are. So there's one of the things that kind of forces accountability, to achieve these NDP goals, so they just don't end up on paper. So then the public has a view of how far we are, a clear and precise view, so that you don't get different stories from different people, or because it's elections, stories change and
Yeah.
stats change and so forth. But you can have a clear vision or a clear view of where exactly are we in terms of these priorities and these goals. And then try and ask the questions as to why we are failing, why have we not achieved this, or what did we do right and what did we do wrong. And so that's one of the things that the National Planning Commission has tried to do, in order to push these sort of barriers towards implementation, really.
Now, having touched on ensuring that the public is involved and in the know of the kind of processes that you guys go through, given the economic pressures in South Africa, how important then is that budget transparency and public participation in ensuring that citizens remain engaged in the country's development processes?
It's quite critical. It's quite critical that we have this public engagement, for accountability.
Yes.
It's clear and important. In fact, with the budget, I think the same tracker tool should be implemented to say, okay, the budget speech that this was going to happen, this is how much we're going to spend, and the effects of this expenditure is such. And so, we can have a clear view as the general public as to whether the budget achieved what it was supposed to achieve. Did they spend what they said they would spend? And if not, why not?
Yeah.
And so, we don't have a situation where we come back every year, we listen to the budget, but we hardly ever know what exactly happened to the last budget. We'll hear here and there about this and that, but we never really have a holistic view of what transpired from that entire budget and what have been the things that we've achieved. And secondly, the monitoring of the failures that would happen within the budget or the execution thereof. We need to have sort of a monitoring system or monitoring mechanism so that we can learn from these failures and see what was done wrong, what was done right, and so to improve the efficiency of this expenditure or government expenditure, really.
All right, so you're still watching Parliament TV, and we are in conversation with Dr. Tshepo Fela from the National Planning Commission as we anticipate the budget speech from Minister Enoch Godongwana that will be delivered today on the 19th of February 2025 at 2 p.m. at the Dome right here on the Parliamentary Precinct. Now, Doc, just looking at future now, right? And as we move closer to the NDP 2030 target, as you mentioned earlier, that it's right here. We're in 2025. That's 5 years now. What key milestones then should South Africans be watching for in the MTDP 2024-2029 when it comes to monitoring on their side, especially now that we've touched on the importance of public participation and the importance of the public being in the know of the processes that are being followed?
Okay, I think generally we had a good position for economic growth, given that GNU and its priorities. We are placed quite right to increase our economic growth, right?
Yes.
And secondly, we we will see quite a bit of improvement in our general infrastructure, because I anticipate there will be quite an investment into that. So the public will see an improvement in our general infrastructure. The efficiency of government as well. There should be some improvement within, the professionalization of the public sector, to be more efficient. We'll see a bit of that as the budget will focus on investing in some of these, things like the digitization of government and so forth, the innovation and such. So we'll see such improvement as well. Yeah, education, we might see some improvement in there as well. And generally, those are some of the things that, the public can watch out for.
And of course, then, having listened and being in anticipation of what the minister might say today, of course, we know that the minister's speech is aligned with the State of the Nation address. And of course, then those allocations are made in terms of those priorities that the president shares. There's been a lot of reservations, especially with regards to the State of the Nation address, that the president did not address, especially youth unemployment and issues of the youth, such as those that own SMMEs. Do you then think that there will be enough done, or enough is being done in terms of budget allocations to ensure that issues that the youth have, such as unemployment, are being alleviated?
I don't think there's enough. I mean, if there was enough, we wouldn't have a rise in unemployment.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally, we need to look at the SME environment, the business environment in which the SMEs operate, and how do we create enablers within them. One thing is, the investment in infrastructure is quite critical as well, because it cuts across the different industry sectors and so forth. So the SMEs might benefit from this investment in infrastructure as well. Looking as well at the tax situation, consumption taxes and such. If the revenue collection from government is improved, yes, it has improved over the last couple of years. But if the revenue collection is made more efficient, that might create that cash flow I was talking about earlier to reinvest in things like SMME funding and so forth to create this better environment for trade, including access to markets and such.
And then lastly, as we anticipate the minister's finance speech, of course, what should South Africans, especially young people and entrepreneurs, pay close attention to with his speech?
Well, consumption taxes and the cost of consumption for one, and look for opportunities to save money. There will be some increases here and there that might affect your average consumer in the street. General taxes or business taxes, for the SMMEs as well. And practically, loopholes to save money for businesses. There'll be rebates, there'll be, certain incentives that will be there. We need to take advantage of those and see how we can, build a business environment for SMMEs for that. But generally for the consumer, it might be a little bit difficult because, there's not a lot of control that the consumer will have from what the budget will outline today. But generally to look for those loopholes where you can, save money and see where you can, try and grow your savings rate and such.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Fela.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
And of course, that was Dr. Tshepo Fela from the National Planning Commission, sharing insights on the relationship between the NDP, the MTDP, and the 2025 budget. It's clear that this year's budget is not just about government expenditure, but about aligning our economic vision with real, tangible development outcomes for South Africa. Now, as we build up to the Minister of Finance's budget speech at 2 p.m., stay with us for more expert analysis and discussions right here on Parliament TV.
Following the President's State of the Nation address on 6 February, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will present a budget allocation for 2025 to Parliament on Wednesday, 19 February at 2 p.m. The budget speech, among others, aims to balance economic growth and support for the vulnerable in our society despite limited resources. During the speech, Mr. Godongwana will outline all the financial, economic and social commitments that the government will prioritize in its planned expenditure. The minister will provide a detailed plan for 2025 spending, including proposals for revenue collection to help fund government's planned interventions and commitments. He will also introduce the appropriation bill and table the division of revenue bill, which Parliament will process in the following months. The budget process is one of the critical instruments that Parliament utilizes to conduct oversight over the executive. Watch the budget speech live across Parliament's platforms from 2 p.m. on Wednesday, 19 February. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
Anchoring inflation expectation is important for our macroeconomic policy framework, and this is what the Reserve Bank is responsible for. To strengthen this framework, we continue to work on assessing the suitability of monetary policy targets and to improve the levers of macroeconomic policy coordination. Pillar 2 is about implementing structural reforms, including those in Operation Vulindlela. These will continue to strengthen the economy to be more productive and international competitive, accelerating inclusive growth, economic growth, and foster much-needed job creation. The first phase of Operation Vulindlela provides a tangible evidence that structural reforms can reduce economic bottlenecks. It also demonstrates that government can collaborate effectively with business for the collective good. Some of the achievements of Operation Vulindlela include a large pipeline of about 22.5 megawatts of private sector investment in renewable energy projects, a 50% reduction in the cost of data for 1.5 gig, reduction in the waiting period for obtaining water use licenses for almost 90 days, and the introduction of an e-visa system to travelers from 34 countries. Building on these successes, the second phase will continue to prioritize network sectors. In the energy sector, we will continue to restructure the electricity supply industry, establish a competitive electricity generation market, and alleviate constraints on transmission infrastructure. In transport, we will open the freight rail network to private operators to reduce inefficiencies and cost. In water, the focus is on creating independent economic regulation and strengthening the local water service regulatory environment. The second phase will also introduce new focus areas that seek to strengthen local government, harnessing digital infrastructure, and integrating urban environments to make cities more efficient.
Welcome back to our Budget 2025 build-up show here on Parliament TV, where we continue to bring expert insights ahead of the much-anticipated 2025 budget speech. A crucial institution in South Africa's budget process is the Parliamentary Budget Office, which provides independent expert research and analysis to help Parliament oversee government finances effectively. The PBO recently published its 2025 pre-budget brief, which raises important questions about the country's fiscal framework, the long-term impact on austerity, and alternative approaches to drive inclusive economic growth. To help us unpack these critical issues, we are now joined by Dr. Dumisani Jantjies, Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office. Dr. Jantjies, thank you very much for talking to Parliament TV. Sibulela ba uthathe ixesha mhlekazi kwiprogram yakho ebhizi yanamhlanje wazoba nathi apha.
Enkosi kakhulu Thembinkosi, ndiyabulela for ku-invite ndizohlala nabantu your audience as well. Thank you so much.
Sure. To dive into this conversation, I think it will be very important to mention the key issues that have been raised in the 2025 pre-budget brief. Can you take us through the role of the Parliamentary Budget Office in terms of shaping fiscal policy debates as well as the parliamentary oversight?
Thank you once more, Thembinkosi. I think what we do a lot of time, we support members of Parliament when processing the budgets. So our idea, our expectations from the mandate is to provide the insight to members of Parliament what is likely to be the context in which the budget is presented, particularly looking at the economic context, social context, but also the public finance context to say where we are and how the budget being presented today is likely to shape such macroeconomic variables. So that's really where we wanted to set up. It's linked largely with our mandate, which advises Parliament on macroeconomic and fiscal policy as a whole.
Now, how do these engagements between your office and the members of Parliament take place? And are you getting enough support, or do you get to really engage with the members? I know your office normally writes to the chairpersons of the committees. Do you get the response for them? Do you get to sit down and really engage these members of Parliament on the issues that you would have highlighted?
Yes, we're actually privileged that the Act has placed us at the center of the budget process in Parliament, whereby the Act requires us to advise committees. We work a lot closely with finance and economic committees, but widely with Parliament, members of Parliament, both houses. So what we do, like when the budget is presented today, we will be required to do analysis and advise Parliament on some of the key matters to consider before approving the budget proposals by next week. So next week, Tuesday, your audience can look forward to our engagement with the committee. So we really appreciate that privilege that we have. I guess for the main thrust of the question is how has our work been used as part of oversight, which it's a very mixed bag for me. And I think there's a good opportunity for Parliament to take this work and influence the budget process.
What is it that you feel it's not being done? Because you don't sound too happy, because I understand that your office does a lot of important work for this institution. So it's important that whatever your office produces really gets to the members of Parliament, because they are the ones who really do this oversight over these departments.
Look, the Act very clear. We advise and then Parliament decides on what it does with our advices. But I think, let me give you an example. Last year in the midterm budget policy statement, we raised concerns around the lack of strategic plan for the next 5 years. And our view is that it is almost difficult to approve the budget without that plan in place, which spell out specifically what should be the fiscal strategy be, and so on. And clearly, maybe it's the budget process itself. You find that at times government just proceed with such critical issues not being addressed. But maybe, as I say, maybe it's the budget process itself. But our view is that Parliament has so much authority over the budget in this country. And that authority should really reinstate it and give Parliament authority to decide what should happen in terms of budget process. And I think the role of PBO and many other entities, fiscal institutions, are there to support Parliament. And my view is that Parliament can benefit a lot in using these entities, work in really guiding strategically where the country should be going.
Now, as I had said, your office produces this 2025, like it produces the pre-budget documents or briefs, and in the 2025 one, it looks like your office provides a critique of the current fiscal framework and its consequences. Can you unpack the key findings and concerns that had been raised in that brief?
Thanks for that. I think this starts from the way we understand the budget in government. I think our argument is really to say the way we understand budget in government has to really shift quite a bit, in the sense that a fiscal strategy has to be really have the long-term plan as a mainstay in terms of strategy, midterm development plan. In a way, then, when we have a fiscal strategy, it's to be really based on that. To give you an example, we need to create employment, we need to create support household, ensure equity, get growth. But many instances, our concern has always been the fiscal strategy is presented without saying exactly how will employment be created and how will the jobs, economy will be grown, and particularly how will the inequity be addressed in particular. And in that way, that makes it difficult for Parliament to hold them accountable over a period of time to say, look, the budget has said this last year. How far are you in getting growth? And what are the challenges? So our concern is that, Parliament get these proposals year in, year out, particularly in fiscal strategy. And there's a strong evidence which is published, which is done by various institutions, that actually our fiscal strategy over the past 17 years or so has contributed to a certain extent in really not getting growth not create employment, and because there's been a lot of underinvestment on a side, and that really the issue of having a good link between the plan and the budget framework, and that's really the crux of our concerns around that. In a broader sense, we are saying, what should be the fiscal strategy about? Should be about growth, employment, and dealing with poverty inequality, and that's really our concern. That should be the focus of it. And we're saying over the years we've seen the focus has a lot been around dealing with debt finance, because these are very important issues. But those are the outcomes of lack of growth, and focusing without focus on the broader issues, you'll never have realized those outcomes, and we haven't dealt with that. We haven't dealt with budget deficit, yet we've constrained growth a lot of times, which led to unemployment. So that's really a sense of the criticism. Say, look, we probably need a different strategy. But what made me happy, very excited as well, is when during the State of Nation address, when the President made it clear some of the priorities that the 7th administration will follow, which are spelled out in the midterm development plan, which in my view, then the budget should follow that. It shouldn't be that there has been a lot of growing perceptions over the years. We've raised concern that at times we find the budget diverging from what the State of Nation address says. And that's really a concern a lot, which I view Parliament should really take that into cognizance in reviewing this current year's budget.
I'm glad that you mentioned the alignment between the medium-term development plan as well as the national development plan, because that was one of my question. Now, I want to know from your office perspective, does the current fiscal framework support the development priorities, or are there risks of misalignment?
What we've said over the years, 3-4 years now, we have said the difficulty is that we've always questioned the credibility of a fiscal framework, and that's what we've seen year in, year out, where we set ourselves when we achieve a certain debt level, debt finance level, and we have not realized that, which raised the credibility of the fiscal framework over time. But I think in our view, in our concern is that a lot of times there hasn't been so much obvious alignment. As I said earlier on, one of the things, my wish is that there has to be a lot of discussion to say, how do we get these two converging a lot? You're planning on one side and budget framework, which in our view, it has not really converged. And that's a very, very important determination. If you're going to realize the priorities set out in the development plan or set out by the State of the Nation address, but present in the State of the Nation address, the 3% increase, 3% growth target. That's a huge amount. That means our fiscal strategy should change completely, because we've had 1.2% on average for the past few years. 3% is almost double for that, which means our fiscal strategy, together with other macroeconomic variables, has to really be shaped in a way that we can see as a Parliament, obviously, how we're going to realize that, and there has to be quality information that allows Parliament to assess the progress in that regard.
Does it look like that will be realized as things stand?
Well, with the current framework, we've done a modeling last year, and our modeling did indicate that we're looking at an average 1.8% of the next 3 years growth. So something has to change. I mean, I'm not sure what's going to happen in the budget today, but I'm just saying our modeling for the last year's budget was saying we have average 1.5, 1.67% growth over the next 3 years. That's way fall short of what we projected by the President in the midterm, in the State of the Nation address. But I guess that's then what should Parliament expect the budget to spell out explicitly, how the budget will enable the President to realize his 3% growth of the medium term, as set out in the State of the Nation address.
Whilst on the pre-budget brief, there's a lot of critique from your office on that briefing document. So a major theme there is the continued commitment to fiscal austerity by the National Treasury. Now, can you take us through the PBO's critique of this approach? Because that's another approach that you have criticized.
Yeah, it's a similar thing, Tim, because it's just to say, we feel that government has denied itself long-term planning over the years, particularly with the fiscal strategy, because at the end of the day, we've had a national development plan. One of the targets there of development indicators or some of the macroeconomic targets in there was to have investments at a particular level. We said we want to have 10% growth investment annually, 10% of GDP. We've not seen that. If anything, we've seen 3% of even from the midterm budget statements. The commitment of investment is just 3% of the GDP over the medium term. That's a bigger issue. So hence the criticism to say, are we able to have that's only for public sector, by the way, the 10%. It's not for the NDP says we should have aimed for 30% of investment. 10% is public investment, which includes government and state-owned entities, and 20% the private sector. We have not done our part, and there's no way you can expect a level of growth that's required to create more employment and deal with inequalities and poverty in our country. So that's really crux of thing that we have to say. A fiscal strategy should really following the development plan, not the other way around, which has been the case a lot of time, whereby the budget is made to actually forces what the policy planning to follow it, as opposed to the other one, which is, I guess, that's the main concern that we're raising, and we wish Parliament to take that up.
Now, to move on, there's also some concerns that are raised on the brief, especially relating to budget cuts that may undermine essential services such as your health, education, peace and security. Can you unpack these concerns and explain how ongoing fiscal condition is affecting delivery? And I want you to do that also at the back of your mind with what is currently happening in the institutions of higher learning. We know that some students, the number of universities where students are on strike relating to registrations as a result of academic or financial exclusions. So as you unpack, I want you to highlight those issues, to speak to those issues as well.
You know, the government argues fairly so to say social wage is 60% of the GDP. 60% of the budget actually goes to social wage, which means all those education, health, and all social wage, including the higher education. But I think what we have shown is that actually, in reality, we see decline in spending in this area. In real terms, we see over the medium term, at least I'm talking here based on the midterm policy planning, framework. We see a 3-year decline over time, and our concern is that we're going to do two things here. We're not going to realize our debt trajectory we want to get. Secondly, we're not going to help to deal with socioeconomic issues. So that's really a very worrying issue, because you're not going to realize your debt, at least based on the experience of what we had over the years. And secondly, we're not going to be able to achieve the equity, less poverty, and less unemployment. But also, human developmental index is a very important thing where you need to invest in your society for the next generations to come and so on. And I think investment that we do now in education and education is important to reap the benefits in future. So we're saying there has to be very considered effort to ensure that such expenditure is protected. One of the issues which you've not asked me, but I'm going to raise, is around public employment. It's another issue which for me is worrying, because we have seen how important that public employment, but now we also see from the last year's planning that it's been reduced. It's been cut quite statistically, again, to make a way to get fiscal balance and so on. And it is a concern, because if you're gonna try to get these young people into public employment, getting skilled, you need to actually expand that program, not actually reduce it over the medium term. And what I'm saying is that when you listen to all those issues, it really boils back to fiscal strategy, talking a lot to your development strategy, because you can't say it is on the planning side by the state of the nation or midterm, and the budget not really entirely speaking to those matters, but focusing a lot on the fiscal balances as economic planning. It shouldn't be, in our view.
And that takes me now to my last question for this discussion. We know that the report also suggests that there's been a lack of comprehensive impact assessment when implementing fiscal consolidation policies. Can you take us through why is this a concern, and what role Parliament can play in assessments before even approaching the approving the budget cuts. If you can just be brief in response to that, as we're running a little bit out of time.
All right, thanks. I get excited. I think what the National Development set out is precisely to say for any policy that is introduced in Parliament, there should be an impact assessment. So what we have advised Parliament is say before budget cuts are approved, government has to provide the impact assessment to say this is what it means for service delivery, this is what it means for broader social economic development. And that has not come out, which again boils to the point of the link between the budget and the plan, because clearly if we had those impact assessment, we'll see that that would mean declining in in development and indicators rather than improving them over a long term. And I think the concern should also be we need to have a long-term fiscal strategy rather than continuous short-term strategies we'd have over time. So there's a lot of expectations for the budget, and clearly the President has set out a clear framework from which the budget has to follow. Thank you.
Thank
you so much.
Well, that was Dr. Yanchis taking us through the 2025 pre-budget brief and shedding light on some of the pressing issues surrounding South Africa's fiscal policy, economic growth and development priorities. As we head towards the budget speech, these insights will be crucial in understanding what's at stake for the economy and for all South Africans. You can follow these proceedings. The build-up show is currently live on Parliament TV, DSTV 408. We are live on all Parliament social media platforms. Our handle is @Parliament of RSA. Stay tuned to Parliament TV for more expert analysis and discussions leading up to this year's budget speech.
South Africa's Parliament will proudly host the 11th G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit, known as the P20, bringing together leaders from G20 national parliaments to shape global policies and reinforce parliamentary oversight in international decision-making. As the first African country to lead the P20, South Africa's Parliament is championing Africa's active participation in global governance and economic policymaking, ensuring the continent is a driving force in shaping the future we want. Parliament will play a critical oversight role, ensuring that South Africa's commitments as G20 president translate into real economic growth, job creation, and social development. The P20 summit will embed African perspectives in global decision-making, ensuring that policies on trade, technology, and governance reflect the continent's needs and aspirations. In alignment with SONA 2025's theme, Harnessing Parliamentary Diplomacy for the Realization of Global Solidarity, Equality, and Sustainability, Parliament is committed to fostering international collaboration for a better, more just world. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
Madam Speaker, our fiscal strategy sets to achieve the fiscal sustainability needed to support inclusive economic growth. It carefully weighs competing demands, making the necessary trade-offs between what is most urgent and what must wait given the fiscal constraint. The strategy also supports critical social services and addresses the significant fiscal and economic risks that lie ahead. It does this by prioritizing the following 4 key actions. First, it stabilizes government debt by maintaining sufficiently large primary surplus over the rest of the decade. As announced in the 2024 budget, a debt-stabilizing primary surplus will continue to anchor fiscal policy over the next 3 years. Second, it focuses on maintaining higher levels of investment by directing a growing share of public spending towards capital projects. Third, it protects critical services in the context of constrained budget resources. We do this by protecting the social wage, which supports the most vulnerable through spending on health, education, social protection, community development, and employment programs. Lastly, it focused on the growth in the public service wage bill by ensuring that public servants are compensated fairly while implementing measures to contain overall cost. Madam Speaker, to achieve the goals of our fiscal strategy, we must better manage our debt. The debt has risen too fast and is too high. We are anticipating that government debt will reach more than 6 trillion or 75% of GDP in 25-26. We know that our debt is unsustainable because debt service costs have become the largest component of our spending, and it is rising faster than economic growth. Debt service costs will reach 388.9 billion rand in the current financial year. Put differently, this means for every 1 rand of revenue that government raises this year, 22 cents of this is paid in debt service cost. To deal with this problem, we have taken difficult steps to reduce the budget deficit. We have restrained spending and maintained stable tax collection. As a result of our measures, government achieved a primary budget surplus in 23-24 for the first time in 15 years. As I said earlier, the surplus is needed for us to stabilize debt. The primary surplus is not a pot of money. Rather, it is a difference between what government spends, excluding debt service costs, and what government collects in revenue. Over the medium term, the main budget deficit will decline from 4.7% of GDP in 2024-25 to 3.4% in 27-28, with the primary budget surplus rising to 1.8% of GDP. The primary surplus will be sufficient for debt to stabilize at 75.5% in 25-26. Debt will then decline over the rest of this decade. The key impact of this is the debt service costs will also stabilize and begin to decline over the next few years. Madam Speaker,
you're still watching Parliament TV right here on DSTV channel 408, and this is the build-up to the 2025 budget speech which will be delivered by the Minister of Finance in the National Assembly at 2 p.m. Now, a critical institution in shaping South Africa's fiscal and intergovernmental financial system is the Financial Fiscal Commission, known as the FFC. As an independent advisory body, the FFC provides expert, evidence-based recommendations to Parliament, provincial legislatures, and government on how to achieve a sustainable and equitable fiscal system in line with our constitutional values. Now, with the upcoming budget expected to address fiscal constraints, service delivery, and long-term economic growth, the role of the FFC is more important than ever. And to help us unpack the Commission's perspective on the 2025 budget, we are joined by Dr. Patience Mbava, and she's the chairperson of the Financial and Fiscal Commission. Doc, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Tsepo. It's good to be here.
Of course, as you know how we roll. We always start with, please just give us a brief explanation of what the role of the FFC is and what is it, especially when it comes to shaping fiscal policy and intergovernmental fiscal relations.
Thank you so much for the opportunity again. As you would know, the Financial and Fiscal Commission starts the budget process 9 months before the minister tables his budget. We make our recommendations to government. And those recommendations are interrogated by Parliament, including the minister themselves, and they must find their way into the budget. So the role of the FFC then is to advise Parliament and provincial legislatures on the equitable division of revenue. How do we allocate resources in an equitable manner to the provinces and to local government. And so the FFC then was one of the key institutions which was founded by our fathers to ensure that that process does not have any partisan influences. So we are an independent institution. So we are supposed to look at this process with independence and also based on evidence.
Yes.
Yes. So we're a constitutional institution. We're in the Constitution, Section
Yes.
220 of the Constitution.
Now, with that, Doc, of course, the upcoming budget is being tabled in the context of economic uncertainty, right? Fiscal consolidation and increasing social demands. Now, from the FFC's perspective, what are the most pressing fiscal issues that the Parliament and the public should be paying attention to?
So the biggest concern for the Fiscal Commission right now is the fact that we have debt service costs that are just growing every year. And also, when we look at the debt to GDP ratio, now we are approximately around 75% of GDP. And for a country like South Africa, which is developing, that becomes unsustainable and a cause for concern. So what does this mean? It means that we need to look at what is the cause of this mushrooming debt. So there are key issues that we have to look at, the key drivers of this mushrooming debt. One is historical debt as a country.
Okay.
So we had bonds, payments that we received, and now those are becoming due. So we call them bond redemptions. So we have to pay back the money we borrowed as a country in the past. So it's becoming due now, maybe 10 years later.
Okay.
You know, it's becoming due now. That also is an impact. Secondly, it's the state-owned entity bailouts.
Yes.
Those also have an impact on that debt to GDP ratio. Thirdly, the mushrooming wage bill is also having an impact. And also, finally, the competing interests in terms of paying social grants, you know, those are also, you know, causing a lot of demand. But the biggest line item out of all of this is the interest that we pay on the debt. So we call it the debt service cost, but it's the interest. That interest is the one that is taking a huge chunk of the pie. So, for instance, if I have to explain that, if you have to look at the health budget, it's actually much less than what we pay on the debt. That is the enormity of how much we are paying. And the money we are paying on servicing the debt, there is no value to South Africans. There is no benefit. There is no service delivery. There is no infrastructure. We are just paying a third party, banks out there, you know, for the money we have borrowed in the past. So issues like healthcare, education, even the police, service delivery, those are going to suffer. Now there's even more of a competing interest in the sense that now we have an NHI, which has to be funded. It has to be added to the health budget. Now, where is that money going to come from? So the question then is to say, how does the Minister of Finance now traverse this thin line between revenue and expenditure? Where do we get the money? So the solution that has been proposed is to say we must tighten the belt as a country to what we call fiscal consolidation. And we've seen the offshoots of that in the last financial year, where we did manage to achieve, not much, but quite 0.4% of GDP as a primary budget surplus. Still not enough, but it's still, it shows that the efforts that we've been making in terms of reducing our expenditure are paying off. But what we have to do, we have to sustain that every year. Because every time we go to the money markets to borrow, because we have been graded as a sub-investment grade or junk status by the rating agencies, we borrow at high cost. So when we demonstrate to the lenders and to the rating agencies that we are dealing with this debt situation, they will then reconsider our credit rating as a country, our sovereign rating. So I think that the important thing then for South Africa is to say that let us be consistent and remain prudent when it comes to spending, because there are competing demands and there's only so much that we have as a country.
And Doc, then I know that the FFC has previously suggested that fiscal policy should not just focus on cost cutting, right, but also on investment-driven economic growth. Now, can you take us through the alternative approaches then that could ensure long-term fiscal sustainability while still meeting the needs of the citizens?
One of the key areas we can look at is local economic development. Most of our people in the rural communities with their municipalities around those areas, they need jobs, essentially. Unemployment is a huge problem. And with the growth rates that we have currently, which are pedestrian, less than 1%, these are not enough to actually absorb labor market entrance. So we need to grow the economy, and one of the ways we can grow that is to stimulate local economic development and also infrastructure development. We need to actually work on infrastructure as a job creator. But the problem, the challenge there rather, is that the institutions that are supposed to lead infrastructure are the state-owned entities. Some of them are failing in the sense that they are not meeting that mandate. And so now we have to look outside of government to assist us with those infrastructure developments, and that is through public-private partnerships. But then those also have their own nuances that we have to look at.
Doc, we never have enough time with you. Just as a last question, we'd like to know from the FFC's perspective then, do you then think that the minister is going to stick to his fiscal consolidation strategy that we've seen in your budget for 2024 and the medium-term budget that he delivered last year as well?
I think the minister, because he has made that commitment, and also the international financial institutions that are observing South Africa have engaged South Africa to say you need to remain consistent on this fiscal consolidation. The minister really has to find a way either to find revenue elsewhere or to cut the belt. We've had the IMF, who came to the country, they made strong recommendations. One of their recommendations, though, which they have made, is that South Africa must regulate a fiscal anchor. What that means is that we must legislate a benchmark where we cannot go above in terms of accumulating debt. But as a FFC, we don't think that we need to go there at this point. We believe that because we have shown that we can, if we do cut the spending, that we can achieve, a primary balance surplus. We must just sustain it and stay the course.
And do you think that people, the ordinary South Africans, should fear that there might be an increase in tax?
I do not think there will be an increase necessarily when it comes to income tax. But when it comes to VAT, perhaps we might see some increase there, because you would remember that there was VAT income that we have lost as a country. Remember when Eskom was not effective, we had to buy fuel. And when we bought that fuel, there was tariffs and VAT on that. That was revenue for the country. Now that Eskom is stable, in a way, we no longer gain that VAT income. So what that means is that we have to find other sources of income. So either it's going to be VAT through businesses or but Minister, maybe he'll talk about it. But it's going to be an interesting discussion,
obviously.
But I think at this point, when it comes to the normal Joe on the road, they do not have to enough money. They are taxed as it is.
Of course.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much again. Thank you.
And that is Dr. Patience Mbava, and she is the chairperson of the FFC. And she shared her insights on the fiscal challenges and opportunities facing South Africa ahead of the 2025 budgets. Of course, those were some invaluable perspectives that help you as a viewer to understand the bigger picture and the implications of today's budget speech. Now, as we count down to the budget speech, it remains crucial that Parliament and the public engage critically with the budget choices and trade-offs that will shape South Africa's economic future. Stay tuned to Parliament TV for more in-depth discussions and analysis.
Following the President's State of the Nation address on 6 February, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will present the budget allocation for 2025 to Parliament. on Wednesday, 19 February at 2 p.m. The budget speech, among others, aims to balance economic growth and support for the vulnerable in our society despite limited resources. During the speech, Mr. Godongwana will outline all the financial, economic and social commitments that the government will prioritize in its planned expenditure. The minister will provide a detailed plan for 2025 spending, including proposals for revenue collection to help fund government's planned interventions and commitments. He will also introduce the appropriation bill and table the division of revenue bill, which Parliament will process in the following months. The budget process is one of the critical instruments that Parliament utilizes to conduct oversight over the executive. Watch the budget speech live across Parliament's platforms from 2 p.m. on Wednesday, 19 February. Your Parliament, your voice, your future. In terms of the Constitution, government is accountable to Parliament. Parliament, as the representative of the people, monitors and seeks to influence government policy and action through the budget. The budget is the instrument for translating policies and plans into public goods and services. Any policy or plan without a budget attached to it is unlikely to be successfully implemented. Economic success depends on the ability of government to employ limited resources with maximum effect. The role of Parliament in this regard cannot be overstated. Parliament's duty is to detect and prevent abuse, prevent illegal and unconstitutional budgetary conduct on the part of the government, make government budgetary operations more transparent, and hold the government answerable on how taxpayers' money is spent. Parliament exercises its oversight through various portfolio committees that assess the budget and other plans, as well as the performance of each department, including their financial performance, and hold them accountable. The budget process is crucial to good governance because it ensures that government expenditure remains aligned to South Africa's policy goals and objectives. What is also of great importance is that ongoing monitoring and tracking of the executive by Parliament allows for intervention in the event of wrongful expenditure and failures in service delivery. The process holds government departments accountable for their expenditure and gives Parliament and the citizens it represents an opportunity to make their own demands and interventions.
Welcome back, and you're still tuned into Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408. One of the most critical aspects of the national budget is ensuring that it addresses the needs of provinces and municipalities, which are at the front line of service delivery. The Select Committee on Finance, which operates under the National Council of Provinces, plays a crucial role in ensuring that budget allocations and fiscal policies reflect the realities faced by local communities. To help us understand what provinces and municipalities can expect from the 2025 budget and how Parliament will exercise its oversight role, we are now joined by the Chairperson of the Select Committee on Finance. Chairperson, welcome and thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Awit Tembi, and greetings to the viewers out there.
Chair, if you can just start this conversation by having you explain the role of the Select Committee on Finance and the National Council of Provinces in the budgeting process.
I think the first thing you must understand that when we say we are National Council of Provinces, as a NCOP, we are sent by provinces, and then we are all another sphere of Parliament. So ourselves as Select Committee, we are making sure that the issues or the issues that are from the provinces are addressed at that level. So I think it is our role to make sure that as a Select Committee, we make sure that the provinces and the municipalities are expecting that there will be an increase, especially in this budget speech from the minister. That's what is expected, because we met with SALGA as a committee, and then they also raised the point that it is unfortunate that whatever the budget, the MTBPS, if you recall, that it was not covering them, and most of the issues or service delivery was not addressed. And since well we know that the municipalities and the provinces are at the cold phase of service delivery, so it is important that they are expecting the minister to increase their budget. Thanks.
And as you rightfully put it, the president also emphasized on the funding of the municipalities and also strengthening of these municipalities in terms of capacity and also technical skills. So as many of these provinces and municipalities, they still continue to struggle with inadequate funding, rising service delivery demands and misfinancial management. Would you say there's an urgent need for increasing their budget allocations, and what arguments should be made to support this increase?
I think it must be known that as they will be increasing the funding, it must also know that there is the annual performance plan that you also have to monitor, because during our provincial week, we have realized that in most cases, most of the budget, as we've been sent to the provinces, they are not doing what they're supposed to do. And then for that annual performance plan that we expect from the provinces, it is we anticipate that for this budget, if the budget is going to favor them as we expect that there could be an increase on their budget, we're going to monitor and to make sure that whatever money that is being sent to the provinces and the municipalities are going to be monitored, and there will be an accountability, because there's an issue of non-accountability in most cases, which the community is also complaining about. Everyone is complaining to say, but you said you have built the stadium, but you don't see the stadium. You said you have built the clinic, you don't see the clinic. So I think it's one of the things that we have looked at as a select committee to say, we are going to follow the money. Thank you.
I'm glad that you mentioned the issues of non-accountability and also following up on the money. And it's not the first time that we are faced with those challenges. What is the 7th Parliament or the 7th Parliamentary Committee going to do to ensure that there is that accountability and that monies that are appropriated really get to be used for the project that they have been allocated for?
As I indicated, is that as we will be following the money. Currently, there is a process that we have sent out a circular or to say we invite all the public to bring their comments in terms of what is expectations. And we believe that we are going to have a public hearing also and listen to what they will be saying with regard to the budget. But over and above, I think it's very much important that as a select committee, we are inviting the provinces, we can invite the municipalities, we can invite everybody, as long as we get a complaints from any public to say, we are having a complaint of not getting the services, so we are able to be a mouthful of the public in Parliament.
Chairperson, understanding that there's not enough time before the proceeding starts in the dome, but I want you to maybe speak to the people of Hammanskraal. We know that there's been a challenge in Hammanskraal in relation to water there, and just about a few minutes ago, probably will not be privy to it now because that statement would have been issued as you were making your way to the studios. But Parliament has issued a statement, the Portfolio Committee on Water and Sanitation, whereby they are calling on municipalities to benchmark the city of Cape Town in terms of water resource management because of their good strategies in terms of reserving water. So for the people of Hammanskraal that have been sitting without water for isikhathi eside, womuphi umyalezo nozushiyele bona ukuthi okanye womuphi umyalezo wethemba nozubanikeza nabantu base Hammanskraal lokuthi kuzokwenziwa yi-committee select committee on finance ukuthi ibhekane nenkinga ababhekene nazo?
Thanks, Tembi. I think the water and sanitation portfolio is dealing with that matter, and then they will also assist them because remember, we have a select committee of water and sanitation, and also we have the portfolio committee, and also as I recall, the Minister of Water and Sanitation, Majudina, was able to address the issue of Hamaskral. I think the National Parliament is busy handling the matter, and we hope that at the end of the day, the problem of water is going to be addressed, because it is an outcry in the whole country to say how best can we assist our public in relation to the issue of water. I think even where I'm coming from, we also have a challenge of water, whereby sometimes we don't know whether it's a challenge of the municipality or it's a challenge of the service provider, being Lepelong Kumpi, Mahali's water, on all those things. So I think the Department of Water and Sanitation, especially under the leadership of Mema Judina, will be able to address the issue and will be able to assist even the portfolios, including the Select Committee, on how best can they deal with the issue of benchmarking with the Cape Town or the Western Cape. Thank you very much.
Ms. Sanindlov, Chairperson of the Select Committee on Finance, thank you very much for taking time off your busy schedule to talk to us. I know that
I'm rushing to the
should be rushing to the house now,
yes.
as we are 5 minutes away from the speech.
Okay.
Well, viewers, that was the Chairperson of the Select Committee on Finance, Ms. Sanindlov, sharing her insights on the budget expectations for provinces and municipalities and the critical oversight role played by the Select Committee on Finance. It is clear that the effective fiscal oversight and adequate budget allocation for local government are essential to ensuring that South Africans receive the services they need. We are looking forward to seeing how the NCOP and Select Committees continue to hold departments accountable for ensuring that the budget priorities receives service delivery at the community level. Stay tuned to Parliament TV. We'll be right back.
Following the President's State of the Nation address on 6 February, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will present the budget allocation for 2025 to Parliament on Wednesday, 19 February at 2 p.m. The budget speech, among others, aims to balance economic growth and support for the vulnerable in our society despite limited resources. During the speech, Mr. Godongwana will outline all the financial, economic and social commitments that the government will prioritize in its planned expenditure. The Minister will provide a detailed plan for 2025 spending, including proposals for revenue collection to help fund government's planned interventions and commitments. He will also introduce the appropriation bill and table the division of revenue bill, which Parliament will process in the following months. The budget process is one of the critical instruments that Parliament utilizes to conduct oversight over the executive. Watch the budget speech live across Parliament's platforms from 2 p.m. on Wednesday, 19 February. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
You're still tuned in to Parliament TV right here on channel 408 on DSTV. And of course, you can follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, X, TikTok, LinkedIn, IG at Parliament of RSA. And tell us what your expectations are from the Minister of Finance's speech right now at around 2 o'clock, 3 minutes to there. And he will be giving us that speech with regards to what he has for us in terms of the budget speech that aligns with the State of the Nation address that the President delivered last week on the 6th of February.
Yes, and we are exactly about 2 minutes away before we cross to the chamber where the Minister of Finance will table the budget speech. And I'm sure all eyes are on TV screens, ears listening to radio, South Africans waiting to hear what the Minister will present to the nation this afternoon at 2 o'clock, especially following those priorities that had been outlined by the President during the budget speech.
And one of them, the important one, of course, is economic growth, and that is directly, it goes into unemployment. And of course, that's in the chamber while members are interacting and awaiting Minister Enoch Godongwana, the Finance Minister, to deliver his budget speech for 2025. This is the first budget speech under the Government of National Unity and the first under the 7th administration of Parliament.
And a number of familiar faces there on your screen with the members of Parliament interacting before the Minister of Finance takes to the podium and deliver the finance, the budget speech. And of course, the event is taking place at Mester Dome.
Yes.
If you come across, if you come closer to Parliament, or if you are in the parliamentary vicinity, you will see a big dome in one of our parking areas. And if you're wondering what is happening there, just know that is where members of Parliament meet and discuss issues of national importance.
And of course, that is because Parliament is rebuilding and reconstructing the National Assembly that was gutted down by fire in early 2022. And that is why we have that dome in the Nevermeester parking. And of course, members are there awaiting the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, to deliver the much anticipated budget speech. I know that there are various concerns, especially with regards to whether there'll be VAT increases and whether the income tax bracket will be asked to increase some of that income tax. And of course, people are concerned with that because the income tax bracket is so small, and people say that they're already overtaxed.
And I'm sure, as I said earlier, the eyes are all on the screens, especially in relation to that income tax. South Africans are waiting to hear whether the taxes will be increased or decreased when the president tables the budget speech at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And of course, here at Parliament TV, we will bring you that delivery of the budget speech, and we'll even bring you some reactions from the members of Parliament after once the speech is delivered. And as you said, South Africans, they have different expectations.
Yes.
Some are worried that prices of cigarettes, alcohol might
Syntax.
go up, you know, and
Yes.
some are also worried that they are those that receive the grants from the government are also waiting
Of course.
to hear if there's going to be any increases, you know, in terms of their grants.
All right, and scheduled to deliver the budget speech is Minister Enoch Godongwana, and hopefully he will focus on some of the issues that you have outlined while we've been reading your tweets and some of your comments on Facebook, and some of the issues that you have been talking about are with regards to health, basic education and higher education. And I think in this regard, we'll have to talk to NSFAS and funding in that regard. We're talking about unemployment, poverty, water and sanitation, housing, transport, especially the railway infrastructure, and of course what the President promised in his keynote address of the State of the Nation address when he said South Africa will become a construction site.
And I'm sure South Africans are waiting to hear how much money will be allocated for such projects, because we're really expecting, as the President had made a commitment, to see this country being turned into a construction site. There's lots of work that still needs to be done. Of course, if the country is turned into a construction site, there'll be opportunities of employment for young people, for old people, for almost everyone. So we wait to hear how much monies will the Minister of Finance be allocating for those projects. We are like 2 minutes after 2 o'clock, but we're still waiting. You know, when Tsepo goes on delivery budget, man, I don't think the minister should really be walking in there at 2 o'clock. Maybe you should be waiting and in anticipation and panicking. Like, makuzoba nomshado nje ukubona ukuthi make semile lapha umyeni linda umakoti engazi ukuthi kuphi kanti uyeza. And Tsepo, one other thing here with the minister, with the current Minister of Finance, you know, I was hoping that ngizofika lapha e-studio namhlanje ngifake lesi sigqoko because of today's event. And we're expecting, and you know, that's the signature of the Minister of Finance. It's unfortunate that we don't even have alus here to honor the former Minister of Finance and the late Minister Tito Mboweni, and obviously the other also late former Minister of Finance, Mr. Provincial.
Of course. However, we're still right here at Parliament TV channel 408, awaiting the much anticipated budget speech by Mr. Enoch Godongwana. Of course, you can join that conversation by liking, subscribing, and following us on all social media platforms at Parliament of RSA, and tell us what your expectations are in terms of those strategies and those prioritizations in terms of the budget that the minister should look at.
And Sebo, we had a number of interviews earlier in the show. We spoke to the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance. We spoke to the chairperson of the Financial Fiscal Commission, Dr. Mbava. We spoke to the director of the PBO. And those are the people that play a key role in terms of this budgeting process. They were sharing some valuable insights with the committee. Also had with our last interview, of course, the chairperson of the Select Committee on Finance, Ms. Sanin Dlovu.
Yeah.
You know, also having a discussion on issues relating to municipalities, because we know that those municipalities are the closest service delivery areas to the people. So it's very important that that we do proper oversight, especially as Parliament TV on committees that oversee municipalities. We know that the President has raised serious concerns regarding the state of our municipalities.
And also having spoken about youth unemployment and the high rates, I mean, it is good news that we received yesterday that in Q4 for 2024, the unemployment rate did decline to 31.9%. It's only a 0.2 decline. However, it just shows you that at least some work is being done. And of course, this is also associated to the Government of National Unity, where it is said that markets have been doing a lot better since the Government of National Unity was established. Now, is this something that we're going to see in the minister's speech? We still await that, and hopefully he will then also outline what the plans are in terms of SMME investment, in terms of infrastructure investment, in terms of medication as well, because we see that in provinces such as the KZN and the Eastern Cape, that there's a shortage of medication, and that is due to budget constraints. So the minister has a lot in terms of allocating. He has a lot in terms of ensuring that issues of health, education, unemployment, poverty, all these socioeconomic issues that we face on a daily basis are allocated money accordingly. And of course, then Parliament will play that role to ensure and monitor that money is followed.
And definitely, those allocations, we're looking forward to hearing from the minister, but also it's also very important the role that will be played by Parliament, because the monies can be allocated, but there needs to be proper oversight. You know, as we expect the departments will start tabling their annual performance plans for the 2025-2026 rather. So we wait to see, and the committees will have an opportunity to go through those annual performance plans before they can approve the budget. So they'll have to scrutinize and see whether those programs, the targets that have been set, they can be achievable, because some of the complaints that have come through from the portfolio committees of Parliament is that these departments will come to Parliament, present targets that are unachievable. So we also expect that to see that that oversight role from Parliament, especially in relation to the reports of the Auditor General of South Africa, because AG issues reports every day on the performance of this department. It is up to this institution to ensure that it conducts proper oversight over those departments.
And of course, just yesterday we had the Minister of Electricity, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, and I was shocked that 1.6 million homes in South Africa have no electricity. Of course, this was in the context of the Human Rights Commission inquiry into load reduction, and hopefully that is something that the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will also speak to in terms of ensuring that the grid gets into the rural areas where people still do not have electricity.
And as you can see there on your screen, some of the members of Parliament still settling down, preparing for the minister to start delivering the speech. As you can see, the members having those discussions. Looks like it's hot in there. As you can see from that one member on your screen. I'm not sure whether it's hot because of the weather or it's hot because of today's event.
When we talk finances, things tend to get a little bit hot, Temikosi, because one doesn't know what to anticipate or expect from the budget speech that Minister Enoch Godongwana is set to deliver shortly. Of course, those are shots from the Nieuwemeester Dome that is the national, serving as the National Assembly while Parliament is being rebuilt and reconstructed.
And you can see the technology being at play. Cell phones, everyone seemingly on the cell phone. And only if you could get a sneak preview of what's happening in those discussions. We don't know whether they are relating to the speech that is about to be delivered this afternoon, or it's just members having their normal conversation. But like I said, the place looks like it's very hot. That's another member there obhizi ozama ukuziphulula for umoya. So kuyabonakala ukuthi kuninzi okulindekeleyo ukuthi kuwenzeke namhlanje kuleya sitting yenzeka eNive Miesta. Idome, as I had said, that is there in one of our parking areas. That is located just across the road from Parliament precinct.
And we are just a few minutes late, about almost 9 minutes late, however, as we await Minister Enoch Godongwana to announce the budget speech for 2025. Let's take a break. You're still right here on Parliament TV.
South Africa's Parliament will proudly host the 11th G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit, known as the P20, bringing together leaders from G20 national parliaments to shape global policies and reinforce parliamentary oversight in international decision-making. As the first African country to lead the P20, South Africa's Parliament is championing Africa's active participation in global governance and economic policymaking, ensuring the continent is a driving force in shaping the future we want. Parliament will play a critical oversight role, ensuring that South Africa's commitments as G20 president translate into real economic growth, job creation, and social development. The P20 summit will embed African perspectives in global decision-making, ensuring that policies on trade, technology, and governance reflect the continent's needs and aspirations. In alignment with SONA 2025's theme, harnessing parliamentary diplomacy for the realization of global solidarity, equality, and sustainability, Parliament is committed to fostering international collaboration for a better, more just world. Your Parliament, your voice, your future. Following the President's State of the Nation address on 6 February, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will present the budget allocation for 2025 to Parliament on Wednesday, 19 February at 2 p.m. The budget speech, among others, aims to balance economic growth and support for the vulnerable in our society despite limited resources. During the speech, Mr. Godongwana will outline all the financial, economic, and social commitments that the government will prioritize in its planned expenditure. The minister will provide a detailed plan for 2025 spending, including proposals for revenue collection to help fund government's planned interventions and commitments. He will also introduce the appropriation bill and table the division of revenue bill, which Parliament will process in the following months. The budget process is one of the critical instruments that Parliament utilizes to conduct oversight over the executive. Watch the budget speech live across Parliament's platforms from 2 p.m. on Wednesday, 19 February. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
You're still watching Parliament TV for the much anticipated budget speech from the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, that will take place shortly. And of course, we've spoken a great deal about the necessary improvement for the debt to GDP ratio and whether or not the Minister will keep to the fiscal consolidation strategy that he proposed during the MTBPS last year. Of course, there are some concerns with regards to whether there'll be value-added tax that will be increased, whether there will be issues of income tax that might be increased to ensure that we get that revenue that we need, especially because we know that there is an issue of debt and that we are in a deficit as a country. Tembinkosi.
And of course, you can continue follow these proceedings here on Parliament TV, DSTV channel 408. We are live in all our social media platforms at Parliament of RSA, on X, on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, as well as Facebook. We are 13 minutes away from 2 o'clock. We are still waiting for the Minister of Finance to deliver his national budget speech for 2025. Of course, Minister would then be putting allocating monies to the programs that the President outlined on the 6th of February when he delivered his State of the Nation address for the 2025 financial year. We are expecting that after the budget, then the committees of finance, the finance committees of Parliament, your Standing Committee on Finance and Select Committees on Finance will hold public hearings on the bills that the Minister is set to table this afternoon when he delivers that budget speech. And there has been a call out by Parliament for members of the public to make submissions. When I spoke to Dr. Yanchis earlier on, he also emphasized the importance of the members of the public's contributions into this budget process. Hence, Parliament will then be calling for, is already in actual fact calling for those submissions to be made to Parliament as they will be conducting the public hearings next week. And following those public hearings, we'll then expect the departments, various departments, to table their annual performance plans to the committees of Parliament for scrutiny, so that we can see that whatever plans and the budget that they put into those plans is something that can be realized.
And just a reminder that the budget is more than just numbers. It is about shaping the future of our economy and funding key government priorities and ensuring that resources are allocated to where they are needed most. Of course, Parliament plays a key role in this and is at the center of ensuring that there is accountability and oversight over the government departments. And as the legislative arm of state, Parliament doesn't just receive the budget, it scrutinizes, debates and approves it. And so today we of course will be awaiting what the Minister of Finance is going to say. Of course, members in the chamber are getting ready, and hopefully the Minister will be able to deliver that speech for us. The much anticipated first budget speech 2025 under the government of national unity. And there is the mace. This is a National Assembly sitting, and after that it is the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Toko Didiza, followed by the presiding officers. And this means that proceedings are about to begin in the chamber.
And the gentleman that you see there carrying that is the Sergeant at Arms, Ms. Tibelo Maleme, but will now take you to the House.
May we be seated? Honorable members, can I start the meeting before we... No, honorable member, we will allow you to speak. So can I conduct the session? There's what? What is the emergency about? Where are the mics? Order. Can we please get a roving mic?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Yes.
There are no mics here where we are.
Exactly, I'm seeing
and we
that
can't
too.
start a sitting without having mics, because we are here to be the voice of the voiceless. So when the voice of the voiceless is voiceless, who's going to speak for people? There are no mics here.
Thank you, Honorable Member, for pointing that one out. One may not know what is the challenge. We will check that with the communications team. Order. Honorable members, for now, since there are no mics that are connected, which unfortunately had not been brought to our attention, We will try and utilize the roving mic where necessary. I have just had a consultation with all the whips of parties following a consultation with the leader of the government business. In terms of Rule 48, subsection 2, we have decided to adjourn proceedings for a date to be determined by the programming committee. This is in accordance with Rule 10. Honorable members, before we started the session, we were informed by the leader of government business, as it is the process in terms of the communications between ourselves and the executive, that while today we've been gathered here to actually have the Minister of Finance presenting the budget to this august House, that there has not been agreement in terms of parties in the executive to actually find one another in proposals of the budget. And the executive therefore decided, as some of you already know, and as your whips have said in our discussion, some things that have already been on the media about where there are possible increases and where different parties, as well as members of the communities, perspective on those proposed increases were saying. And Cabinet therefore decided not to come and do a presentation of the budget and allow themselves enough time to re-look at the budget and come back to this House in March at the time at which they will inform us. So, no, honorable members, I will point you, I have noted your hands. Well, in our consultations, which I must report to you, the different whips shared with us their perspectives on the matter. There were those who agreed and asked that we ask the executive to give us a definite time in March so that we are able to deal with the pressures of time for the legislature. Secondly, there were those who were saying they are not accepting the postponement. But obviously, we did indicate that while we note their refusal on the postponement of the sitting, it would not be of any use to postpone when there is no presentation that will be made. There were others who already declared their rejection on what they say it's an alleged increase of 2% on the taxes, so they said they wanted to state it up front that they are not agreeing. So I'm just giving you a perspective of the consultations that we've had. But there was agreement that if there is no budget that is presented, there is no discussion that will be held, as there is no other item on the agenda. Honorable members, we have two hands of members who would like to reflect, and I will give each party to make their reflections. It's something that is unprecedented, but I do think it is correct that when such situations happen, we need to collectively think on the best way forward. And I guess it was correct that we are informed, even though late, that this is the situation. I will now recognize Honorable Malima, followed by Honorable Manye. I don't see the hand at the back. You are recognized, Honorable Member.
Thank you very much, Speaker. We must all know that this is unprecedented. And this is not a practice that we want to set for this parliament. It is going to be your legacy, Speaker, that during your tenure, Parliament could not debate and adopt budget. We are saying to you, you are denying this body an opportunity to be receiving a budget, debate it, accept it, or reject it. You are now subjecting the budget of South Africa to party politics when the budget is supposed to be above party politics. Let the budget be presented here and let Parliament decide that this is the decision that we are taking as Parliament, or whether to accept or not. You cannot come here and say confidently that the parties in the executive are not agreeing. What is that? We don't have parties in the executive. We've got the executive. The executive must come here and present the budget, and this Parliament must decide whether we adopt that budget or not. You are denying the people of South Africa to see what is happening in this government. There is no government. It has collapsed. It has no capacity to present a budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have noted your view. Honorable Malema.
Thank you, Speaker. Now, for us, this day is actually quite a shocker. We are really shocked. This is in the past 30 years, to have a day like this is a serious indication of the crisis that this country is facing. This country has got no leadership. This is what we are facing. We are saying, if we say we have democracy, let democracy come and exercise itself here. This is the theater of politics. Let the Minister of Finance come and say whatever I wanted to say. We don't want to hear rumors. We hear very disturbing rumors that the VAT would have been increased by 2%. In other words, we hear rumors that this ANC-led government wanted to impoverish our people.
Okay,
we have no sympathy with that. The minister must come here and say what he wanted to say, and then we'll deal with it here.
Thank you. Honorable Mulder. Yes, I've noted you, Honorable Member. Order, honorable members. Let's allow other parties to express their views. Honorable Mulder.
Honorable Speaker, this is not a time for cheap politicking. This is serious. It's the first time since the new democracy in 1984 that this has happened. But we also understand that the Government of National Unity is serious about South Africa and about the future. And because of that, we must understand that things could happen in terms of where more time is needed by the Minister of Finance to have these discussions and for the executive to discuss these things.
Order. Honorable members, your leaders of party spoke and they were given time to express their views. Whether others agreed or disagreed, they listened. And I would ask us to do the same.
Thank you,
Honorable Mulder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If we are serious and if we are responsible, we will understand the circumstances. And we know that some political parties will try to make cheap and score cheap political points. I think we need to be responsible. We need to think in terms of the economy and the message that it may send. And we, from our side, will support the decision and give ample time for the executive and the Government of National Unity to come to the right conclusion. And it's not true that Parliament will not have an opportunity to discuss this. When the time is right, we will all, as representatives of the people, discuss the budget in full. We support the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nkwankwa.
Speaker, thank you very much. Where was this discussion held? Why was the UDM not part of that discussion? As a result, we cannot support a decision that we know absolutely nothing about. Secondly, we should not treat a proposal from the executive in the nature of a budget as fait accompli. It is only final after Parliament has approved it. It is therefore logical, if the minister was going to table a proposal, that the proposal should have been tabled here for Parliament to consider, and if Parliament does not agree with that process, we can arrive at a different outcome altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. On the issue of your consultation, Honourable Member, I'm sure you will be clarified because all the whips were asked to harm and have consultations here. Honourable Maimane.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker and Honourable Members. Today does mark a historic day. What I do believe is absolutely important is that what we do in this House is guided by legislation. And therefore the Money Bills and Related Matters Act does compel us as to a particular timeline as to when the budget is going to be tabled, what committees are meant to process it, and how that goes. I want to appeal to you as the Speaker. Firstly, we have raised continuously in this House through the Appropriations Committee about how truncated the time is for the processing of the budget. So any natural delay that emerges as a function of today does in fact mean that Parliament is placed under pressure in not being also being able to consult with the people, for this is where the people are represented. So may I ask that it must not be an arbitrary decision as to when this must be tabled. We must be given a firm date so that we can work the timetable consistent with law. Otherwise, the disagreement that took place today will end up in the court of law, and we as Parliament will be held accountable for that. So let me propose that we get a firm date. We also get the tabling, as the President has promised, of the medium-term plan that he announced, so that we have a framework within which to interpret the budget from. So, Speaker, let us stick to our own laws. Otherwise, we will be inconsistent with that, and the people of South Africa will hold us accountable for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Ganga. Ghana.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I was part of the consultation that you called, and in that consultation there was that understanding that given the disagreements at the cabinet level and that they are not ready to table the budget now, that the postponement be given. So I'm just standing to say that I was part of that meeting and we have agreed that the budget be postponed. Thank you very much.
Order. Honourable members, can we please respect one another? Your leaders of parties did express themselves and they were listened to. And I think it is important for all of us to be respectful of each other, even if we disagree. Honourable Swart.
Thank you, Speaker. On behalf of the ACDP, we did indicate our support when we had the discussion, but we did request that a specific timeline is given, because there can't be an agreement to extend this indefinitely, and we trust that you, Speaker, will engage with the leader of government business so that we know to what date this is postponed. We need calm heads, we need level-headedness at this time, given the fact that the executive has decided not to table a budget today, and it could have severe impact on the markets and on the currency, and therefore we need to send a message that we, and those parties that are in agreement with the postponement, that this is in order for the Government of National Unity to obtain consensus on some contentious issues, which could also be linked to the VAT increase. So from our perspective, we would plead for members, for the broader public, to understand this is a first budget by this Government of National Unity. Let us enable it to reach consensus and let us stabilize the markets and sentiments in the nation. That is the least that is required of us as responsible leaders in Parliament. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Beasley.
Speaker, it's quite clear that Parliament is becoming a laughing stock. The GNU is becoming a laughing stock. The GNU is anti-poor, the GNU is anti-growth.
Order, can we please listen to the speaker on the podium?
And it's an absolute disgrace. Our country is battling with economic growth. When the market sees what's happening with us, it's an absolute joke. And one of the reasons why they can't make a decision is because it's such a bloated cabinet. And the poorest of the poor are paying for a bloated cabinet. There are deputy ministers here that don't even know what they do. We don't know what they do. And we are paying for it, and it is unacceptable, and they should all hang their heads in shame. It is a disgrace.
Honourable Hadebe.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker.
Order, honourable members. Order. Honourable Hadebe.
Honourable Speaker, I rise to confirm that I was part of the consultation that was urgently called, and as the IFP...
Order, honourable members, can we allow Honourable Hadebe? Order! I'm calling everybody on order. Order, Honourable Pambo. I have said to everyone, including the member you are pointing at, that let's listen. Can we? Honourable Hadebe, can you continue?
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I just wanted to confirm that we did form part of the consultation as the IFP, and we agreed and supported the proposal that was put forward before the chief whips of political parties. We view this as a sign of leadership, that when you do need more time for fine-tuning on some of the aspects, you approach Parliament for postponement. In essence, the IFP support the proposal, Honourable Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Michalakis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, contrary to what some of the opposition parties have said, what is happening here today is actually showing two factors that should create immense confidence in what is happening in this country. The first is that Parliament is not a laughing stock, but that Parliament is no longer a rubber stamp to bad policies that will cripple our economy. And the second message that should go out to the markets and to the people of South Africa, Madam Speaker, is that the GNU does not consist only of one political party. Madam Speaker, therefore, the DA supports this postponement, and we hope that the executive will use this opportunity and this time to consider all the proposals on the table, especially the DA ones, so that when we hear a budget that gets put before this House, that it will be a budget of growth that will put our economy on the path of recovery, and that will create jobs for the people of South Africa that they so desperately need. Madam Speaker, if that is the result, then the DA is absolutely willing to wait for a short while to hear a pro-growth budget. And therefore, we will support this postponement, but with a clear message to the executive, and particularly to our partners in the GNU, that you are not alone in the GNU, that we have an equal say, and that we will continue to fight for every single person in this country, most particularly the poor. We support this postponement.
Thank you. Order. Order, honourable members. Al-Jama, Advocate Salim.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and to all members.
As Al Jama, we are going to support the postponement, and I'm going to tell you why. Firstly, the first concern that we brought to fore is the fact that we knew that there were problems even before today. Why wasn't a postponement done sooner than us having to sit in this house? That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you go and look at the markets, dear members, it is already impacted by this budget speech, which is not happening. And also because of our politicking. Who is going to be impacted? The nation. So Al Jama will support the postponement. Why? Because if it is the interest of our nation that they won't be impacted, that is why we will support the budget, the postponement. However, Madam Speaker, all of the chief whips unanimously noted we need a date for this postponement because it has a rippling effect on the rest of the budgets. So we cannot come here today and just say there's going to be postponement in March. The request was, give us a definite date of postponement. I thank you.
Thank you, the ANC.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Indeed, we convened the Chief Whips Forum to consult one another as per the request of the Speaker. The Chief Whips who were in the House at that particular time, they were consulted because they were in the House. I ran all over here looking for the Chief Whips. No one was left deliberately. I passed there. On the issue of postponement, we agree with the postponement, Honorable Speaker, to allow the executive to finalize those contentious issues that they are dealing with in the interest of all South Africans. We therefore requested that we need a date for the budget speech to be tabled. I thank you, Honorable Speaker. We are not here to grandstand as the ANC. Thank you very much.
Order, honorable members. I have allowed all parties that have raised their hands. Honorable Zumula. Honorable Nkwankwa, you have already been given an opportunity. The issues of the Chief Whips, I will ask that the Chief Whips can talk to each other outside. But for now, let me allow Honorable Zumula.
Thank you, Speaker. We need to ask you, Speaker, who decides? Because if you are going to allow the Chief Whips to decide for the entire Parliament, it is problematic. Secondly, you cannot allow a case of the incompetence of the executive, even at the incompetence of Parliament. The executive did not know yesterday that there's going to be a budget today and there's no agreement in the so-called GNU. Therefore, the executive, the Minister of Finance, must come here, present what he has, and let us, as the people, as the representatives of the people, decide for the people. This notion, Speaker, of saying we want to assure the markets and all of these things, it is problematic. This House does not belong to the markets. It belongs to the people. We are the representatives of the people. Massive Minister of Finance presenting what he has. And then the parties here can be seen whether they are in support or they are not in support. Do not deny the parties an opportunity of standing and clearly showing where they stand. And also an indefinite postponement is not going to be acceptable. Because if let us wait for an indefinite postponement, what does that mean? And what happens if after that indefinite postponement, they come back again and they let's postpone again? We are going to have more and more postponements. Makaze apa, sizele lonto apa.
UAT.
Yale Speaker. Gona re le UAT re motho ha tla tlo present mona. E qaqilo ntwena ya tshwatle ya jwale. Ntwela ya phitlheganya jwa. Se ba tsholo ba re bana le lona ba nna le safe. Ha tle mona tlo bua setšhaba se moemetse. Re keke be ra kgona ho sebedisa di-resources tsa government for mahala ga tlela mona re na le baeti mona. Ha tle motho na go utlo re kgolo mo phiatlakanya le ena ha etsa tsa hae. Danke.
Thank you. PA.
Speaker.
Order, honorable members.
They are my friends.
Order.
Don't worry.
Honorable member, you can proceed.
Speaker, what I have seen the
Honorable
past
members. Honorable members. Honorable members of the EFF at the back. Order. Honorable Pambo, can you please speak to the members at the back of the EFF? Honorable Mackenzie, can you proceed?
All right. Speaker, what I have seen the past 2 weeks, I want to tell the people of South Africa that I have seen humbleness, humility, and people that listen to each other. I want to congratulate the Minister of Finance. You came to present a budget which the DA, the PA, and the different parties didn't fully agree with. But the ANC were humble enough and say, let us hear you. What is it you don't like here? For 2 weeks we've been busy. We are seized with the last issue. A wise man changes his mind. We are united. This is not a one-party state. We are together, united, all of us that you see here. These ones, they will not know. They are a government in waiting. We are the government. The government is taking charge. Amen.
Order, honorable members. Order. Honorable members, good.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. First of all, the good parties support the postponement. But the truth is, all parties and the GNU agreed to the postponement, not certain parties. Let us not play politics. Because the people out there are waiting on us to lead this government of national unity. All the parties agreed, not only the DA or the PA, it is the IFP, good PAC. We all agreed. Please don't play politics with our people. Thank you.
Thank you, the PAC.
I confirm that we support the postponement, Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. I have listened to all the parties. Honorable Nchingila, is there a new issue? Honorable member, if it's again repeating on the issue of the postponement I've heard, I will make the ruling now.
I just want to establish, Madam Speaker, that will Parliament reimburse the guests that we've invited to attend the budget?
Well, thank you very much, honorable members. Honorable members, Honorable Dlamini, is there a new issue other than what you have already expressed yourself on?
Thank you very much, Speaker. We want to call for a division so that we are clear. The members of Parliament here, they must by themselves express their decision on this question of postponement of tabling of the budget. So we want to call for division, want to vote here, because some of the ANC, they agree with us that this thing of 2% is nonsense. And they're saying, let's vote. So please, Speaker, we're calling for division, because the 2% is nonsense.
Honorable Zungula, is there another new issue?
It's another issue, Speaker.
Okay, what is the issue?
It is concerning how you are running the House. when there is jeers and noise from this side, you don't call them to order. But from this side, you are very quick to call us to order. So the order is on you, Speaker. Be fair on each and every member of Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I accept that I must listen to all members of the House. And having listened to all of you, and the questions that have been asked about who decides, we were consulted by the executive through the leader of government business. And having applied my mind as the Speaker, it was clear that there was no budget that would be tabled. It was for that reason that I consulted all the parties, and I understand Honorable Nkwankwa unfortunately did not make that meeting, though two of the parties did express their concerns, but unanimously all parties agreed that we postponed. Honorable Malima, I said two parties, which is the EFF is one, MK is another. Yeah. No, ATM was not in that meeting. So can you please not raise those issues which were not part of the meeting? Honorable members, clearly I've listened to the views of all parties, and I think it is in the interest of all of us and the people of South Africa that we postpone and allow time to the Treasury to finalize whatever they need to finalize. You wanted certainty. Executive has given us the date of 12 March to come and present. As this Parliament, we are not going to compromise our timelines as to how we need to deal with that budget. So no time will be shortened for us to deal with these issues in terms of our timelines. So I want to thank honorable members and adjourn the House. Thank you.
Welcome back. You're still watching Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408. And it seems as if that would be it in terms of the budget speech. Unfortunately, there is no budget speech that will be delivered today. There has been some disagreements within the cabinet from what we could pick up from the Speaker. However, the budget speech is now postponed to allow the National Treasury to finalize all the issues of concern before that budget speech is presented here at Parliament on the 12th of March 2025.
That is correct. As Teminkosi has mentioned, that the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Thoko Didiza, allowed members and provided the opportunity for them to air their views in terms of the postponement of the budget speech. Of course, we had been anticipating that the budget speech would take place today. However, because of the circumstances and unprecedented circumstances at that, the budget speech has to be postponed so that parties and members of the executive can just iron out some of those issues that need to be ironed out. And of course, this means that the date is the 12th of March 2025. And of course, you can watch right here on Parliament TV.
And that also means that probably the hearings that we spoke about earlier with our interviewees, that would have been scheduled for next week to look at the legislation that would have been tabled together with the budget speech would be postponed, but please do await official communication from Parliament in that regard, and also be on the lookout for some of the changes that might be made by Parliament on its program to cater for the postponement of the budget speech to the 12th of March.
And you can get that information on www.parliament.gov.za. And of course, some of this information will be shared on all our social media platforms at Parliament of RSA. Just follow, like, and subscribe, and you can be privy to that information. And of course, you can still be part of the conversation and let us know what your thoughts are on the postponement of the budget speech 2025 that will be held on the 12th of March 2025.
And as you would know, that Parliament TV will be right here and will make sure that we bring you a live coverage of that budget speech on the 12th of March, as we've done today with our build-up show, as we're expecting the minister to deliver the budget speech at 2 o'clock today. And kwabo babukeleyo emakhaya akwenzekanga njengoko sele usomlomo eyimiselo olunye usuku apha azotsho umphathiswa wezemali athule khona intetho yakhe lo mhla lowo i-12 kaMarch 2025. So we'll wait and we'll make sure that when that day happens, when that day comes rather, Parliament will be here. Parliament TV will be here to make sure that you are part of those proceedings.
Of course, then Parliament is still responsible for performing oversight, holding the executive to account and ensuring that there is involvement, public involvement. And of course, this means you, because it is your Parliament, your voice, your future. And of course, just a reminder that the budget speech did not take place today. However, as the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Thoko Didiza, has indicated, the budget speech has been postponed to the 12th of March 2025, following some of those robust consultations with the executive. And from us here at Parliament TV, thank you so much for watching. Libito laka ke Tshepo Mori.
Ndiyinzalelwane yamampondomise akutsolo. Igama lam ndinguThembi Nkosi Ngoma.
Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
South Africa's Parliament will proudly host the 11th G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit, known as the P20, bringing together leaders from G20 national parliaments to shape global policies and reinforce parliamentary oversight in international decision-making. As the first African country to lead the P20, South Africa's Parliament is championing Africa's active participation in global governance and economic policymaking, ensuring the continent is a driving force in shaping the future we want. Parliament will play a critical oversight role, ensuring that South Africa's commitments as G20 president translate into real economic growth, job creation, and social development. The P20 summit will embed African perspectives in global decision-making, ensuring that policies on trade, technology, and governance reflect the continent's needs and aspirations. In alignment with SONA 2025's theme, harnessing parliamentary diplomacy for the realization of global solidarity, equality, and sustainability, Parliament is committed to fostering international collaboration for a better, more just world. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.